At the beginning, a school building was shown while Ikuto was thinking about a world of reverse chastity, a world where women possessed the stronger libido. Because of this, women had become the carnivorous types who actively sought out men. Nearby, some girls were calling out to Tanaka-kun and Takahashi-kun, asking whether they had time after school. Ikuto was shown sitting at his desk, thinking that he, Ichise Ikuto, had spent 15 years in this world. He reflected that the gender ratio in the world he had reincarnated into was 1 to 20. Skewed gender ratios were a standard trope in light novels and manga, but when the scarcity of men became reality, one had to remain on high alert. Ikuto recalled that after growing up healthy and strong, he had made his debut outing with his mother before starting elementary school. While his mother was focused on shopping, Ikuto, driven by curiosity, had slipped away to explore on his own. As a child, Ikuto had been walking alone when a woman noticed him and approached, commenting that it was dangerous for a little boy to be by himself and suggesting that he come to her house. Ikuto remembered sensing danger when the woman realized that he was a male child, a shada at that. Ikuto managed to escape somehow, but his mother found out that he had sneaked away and scolded him severely. Because of that incident and his general behavior, Ikuto believed he had probably been judged as a reckless child. He had been allowed to attend elementary school, but middle school had been done through correspondence education at home. That, however, was all in the past. Now in high school, Ikuto found himself surrounded by cute girls. He believed that a pampered harem life should be waiting for him and thought he needed to prepare for the greatest peak of his popularity, or so he had believed. Instead, Ikuto noticed boys around him expressing fear, saying they just wanted to go home early and that walking home with girls was scary because they did not know what might happen. Ikuto observed girls surrounding those boys and thought that since women were carnivorous, men had ended up becoming frightened herbivores. By the standards of Ikuto's old world, there should have been no reason to turn down a girl's invitation. Suddenly, time was called, and two boys intervened, asking everyone to step back and warning that the male guardians would not show mercy if anyone tried to get closer. Ikuto thought about the male guardians, bodyguard-like existences meant to ensure that boys could live their high school lives in peace. They were students of the same age who had been chosen through a selection process separate from general admissions and often acted as intermediaries between timid men and aggressive women. The frightened boys ran away, repeatedly saying that women were scary, while the male guardians dismissed the crowd. The girls watching commented casually as the boys left. Ikuto reflected that the male guardian title likely carried a double meaning: a guardian who was male by gender and someone who guarded males. Even so, Ikuto wondered why girls hit on generic boys like Takahashi and Tanaka when the male guardians were far more handsome. Ikuto heard a girl say that she simply wanted to get close to someone, even if just a little, and Ikuto admitted to himself that he also wanted to get close to girls. Taking initiative, Ikuto called out, offering that he was free after school. He immediately realized that his voice had cracked from nervousness. The girls reacted by pointing out that Ikuto already had Toosaka-kun and said they could not get close because Toosaka-kun was there. Ikuto replied that if they meant Rui, Toosaka Rui was currently in the faculty room. The girls clarified that they were referring to the Ichise Ikuto and Toosaka Rui pairing and said that even they needed courage to interfere with the atmosphere between the two. They urged them to start dating already. Ikuto denied it, thinking about how Toosaka Rui was a male guardian and also a man, just like himself. Same-gender romance was understood and accepted in this world, but Ikuto desperately wanted to date a beautiful girl. After the girls walked away, Ikuto sat at his desk, reflecting on his appearance, his carefully styled black hair, his muscular build with faintly visible abs, his average academics, and his decently good athletic ability. When he had first enrolled, he had felt the gazes of interest from the girls, but now there was no one left. Ikuto sighed, thinking that a pampered harem was nothing but a pipe dream. Then he noticed that Rui was taking a long time and remembered that it was prohibited for male students to go home alone. He decided to go pick Rui up. In the hallway, Rui was surrounded by girls. Ikuto called out to him, and Rui reacted in surprise, asking whether Ikuto had been waiting in the classroom. Ikuto explained that Rui had not come back at all, so he had come to call him. Then Rui apologized to Ikuto. Ikuto then thought about Toosaka Rui. Toosaka Rui had beautiful silver hair, long eyelashes, and large eyes. Toosaka Rui had slender limbs and was 174 centimeters tall, slightly taller than Ichise Ikuto. 1 month into school, there was not a single person who did not know Toosaka Rui. Toosaka Rui was overwhelmingly cool, a prince-like existence. This high-spec handsome guy was Ichise Ikuto's male guardian. Then Rui apologized, explaining that he had been delayed after delivering the class journal and had been stopped by girls along the way. Ikuto remarked that they were all Rui's fans and called him lucky. Rui admitted that while he appreciated the support, it was troubling when it happened every time, especially since it left Ikuto alone. Rui expressed concern, noting that unlike other boys, Ikuto seemed used to girls rather than afraid of them, which worried him as a male guardian. Ikuto understood that Rui would feel responsible if anything happened to the boy he was in charge of. Rui stated that he wanted to continue protecting Ikuto right by his side. Ikuto was struck by how handsome Rui was and thought that it made sense why Rui was popular. No matter how hard a plain guy like him tried, Rui was always next to him, perfect in everything. Even so, Ikuto questioned why he was still so unpopular in a world of reverse chastity. He wondered if there was truly no girl who had genuine interest in him as a man. Sighing, Ikuto accepted that he would never be popular like Rui. Rui noticed that Ikuto was pouting and suggested that having Rui right next to him should be enough. Ikuto found it hard to hate Rui, despite everything, and reluctantly agreed, smiling and stating that as long as Rui was by his side, that was fine. Rui was shocked by this statement, and Ikuto reflected that Rui was not only a male guardian but also a friend. Even in this world, the value of a lifelong friend had not changed. Ikuto noticed Rui blushing and acting flustered, muttering that Ikuto said things that raised his hopes without realizing it. They walked together, discussing plans to visit a newly opened cafe near the station. Ikuto confirmed that he had informed his parents and Kuno-kun that he would be late, mentioning that he was going to hang out with Rui. Rui approved, stating that people would worry otherwise, and boldly declared that he would not forgive any pervert who tried to get close to Ikuto. Ikuto thought it was reassuring, though he felt that Rui was more likely to be targeted. After eating, Ikuto felt full and satisfied. Later, Rui commented that Ikuto was finally able to live a stable daily life. Rui recalled how, when Ikuto first enrolled, he had wandered off alone, spoken to girls without a sense of distance, and used awkward pickup-like phrasing that had been unintentionally cute. Ikuto reacted with embarrassment, begging Rui not to dig that up again. He reflected that in his previous world, shortly before high school graduation, he had woken up and found himself reincarnated as a baby in this world, possessing only limited knowledge at the time. Rui then reviewed the purpose of male guardians, explaining that men alone outside school were likely to be hit on or even taken away by force, and that a male guardian's presence prevented such dangers. Rui added that there was another benefit to being a pair, and demonstrated this when they encountered a girl persistently hitting on a lone boy. Rui intervened firmly, and Ikuto supported him, warning about the potential trauma caused by persistent advances. The girl apologized and fled. Rui explained that working as a pair allowed them to smoothly rescue men being hit on. Ikuto agreed and reflected that despite living 15 years in this world, he still retained senses from his original world, leading him to underestimate danger. Rui pointed out that Ikuto had finally learned not to act on his own whims, and Ikuto credited Rui's education. Ikuto thought about how Rui had never abandoned him, despite Ikuto being far more troublesome than other boys. He acknowledged that Rui was incredibly kind. Ikuto warned Rui to be careful, stating that Rui was more likely to be targeted due to his looks. Rui thanked him quietly. A man thanked both of them for their courage before suddenly recognizing Rui's uniform and fleeing. Ikuto was confused, but Rui urged them to leave. Later, they parted at Ikuto's home. Ikuto thanked Rui for hanging out and wished him a safe trip home. Rui walked away, thinking about changing into something comfortable once home. At Rui's apartment, Rui reflected that Ikuto still misunderstood the meaning of male guardian. Rui questioned whether Ikuto realized how strange it was for a boy to guard another boy, though Rui found that cluelessness charming. As Rui removed clothing, Rui wondered whether Ikuto would be happy if he knew the truth. Rui revealed that Rui was actually a girl, blushing as she looked at her own body. Rui admitted that she wanted Ikuto, and only him, to accept her true form. Rui was shown thinking about the gender ratio being 1 man to every 20 women, a world where women were the carnivores and men had become the prey. Rui reflected that men preferred women who were slender, petite, and flat-chested, with physiques similar to their own, because it made them feel less threatened. While looking at her own chest, Rui thought that this was why male guardians cross-dressed as men. However, the version of herself reflected in the mirror was the exact opposite of that ideal. Rui believed that this was why her past had turned out the way it did. At that moment, Rui's phone rang. Rui looked at the screen and was surprised to see Ikuto's name. The scene shifted to a convenience store, where Ikuto was walking inside while thinking that he had found exactly what he needed. Ikuto noted that he needed to grab the Kyushu soy sauce and nori salt-flavored chips. Nearby, girls noticed Ikuto and murmured that there was a boy, all by himself. Ikuto focused on checking out quickly and planned to eat the snacks while watching a stream. The girls continued whispering in disbelief that a boy was shopping all alone. As Ikuto exited the store, Rui called out to him. Ikuto recognized Rui and asked what Rui was doing there, jokingly wondering whether Rui was stalking him. Rui flicked Ikuto's forehead, explaining that Rui had simply been shopping there as well and that it was a pure coincidence. Rui added that she had decided to wait and escort Ikuto back and showed Ikuto the phone, expressing happiness that Ikuto had kept the promise to stay updated. Ikuto proudly claimed that he had handled everything by himself just fine. Behind Ikuto, girls had gathered, prompting Rui to warn Ikuto not to let his guard down. Rui reminded Ikuto that just because he had not been hit on that day did not mean he was safe. Ikuto reluctantly agreed, then asked Rui what was going on with Rui's chest. Rui was confused at first, but Ikuto pointed out that Rui clearly had breasts. Rui panicked internally, realizing that in the rush to check on Ikuto, she had forgotten to bind her chest. Rui hesitated, wondering what to do if Ikuto rejected her true form. Rui felt shaken and feared that she would not be able to handle it. Ikuto then came to the wrong conclusion, accusing Rui of cross-dressing as a girl just to teach him how dangerous women were, because Ikuto lacked a sense of danger. Rui sighed heavily and concluded that Ikuto was beyond dense, directly thinking that Ikuto truly was an idiot. Ikuto protested being called an idiot, even while admitting that he probably was one. Ikuto reflected that men in this world were pampered excessively and that because Ikuto still thought like his former self from before reincarnation, he could not help but feel jealous. Ikuto acknowledged that he was just a teenage idiot who wore his desires on his sleeve. Rui clarified internally that this was not exactly the kind of idiot she meant. When Ikuto asked whether Rui had said something, Rui dismissed it. As they walked, Ikuto casually commented that Rui with large breasts was not bad either. Rui stopped in surprise, and Ikuto blushed while admitting that Rui looked cute and that Ikuto would totally hit on her before abruptly stopping himself in horror at what he was saying. Ikuto reminded himself that Rui was a guy and that desperation did not justify hitting on Rui. Rui moved closer to Ikuto, asking whether Ikuto truly meant that he looked cute. Ikuto reaffirmed his opinion sincerely. Rui, blushing deeply, decided that only Ikuto would ever see her true self. Rui turned away and began walking, repeating that only Ikuto would see her true self. Ikuto was left stunned. Rui then asked whether Ikuto had checked the group chat. Rui clarified that the message was not from her but from Ikuto's precious little brother. Ikuto groaned in response. The scene shifted to Ikuto's home, where Kuno was sitting on the sofa, and asked why Ikuto was sitting in Seiza. Ikuto thought about how Ichise Kuno, Ikuto's cousin, lived with him for various reasons. Ikuto admitted that he had wondered whether Kuno was angry about Ikuto going out alone to buy potato chips. Kuno claimed not to be particularly angry, though Ikuto immediately recognized that Kuno definitely was. Ikuto reported that he had finished shopping without getting hit on even once and wondered why, saying that made him feel sad. Kuno acknowledged this but questioned why Ikuto had gone alone, reminding Ikuto that women outside were dangerous. Ikuto reflected that although Kuno was a middle schooler, Kuno was also a male guardian, which explained Kuno's overprotective nature. Kuno declared that if Ikuto were ever attacked, Kuno would hold a grudge against every woman in the world. Kuno then gasped, realizing that Kuno had said those words out loud, exposing true feelings even though Kuno had not intended to say them. Ikuto asked whether that was truly how Kuno felt. Kuno explained that the overprotectiveness stemmed from worry for Ikuto and for Kuno's own peace of mind. But Kuno did not want to be too heavy a burden on Ikuto. Kuno acknowledged that Ikuto's kindness and lack of fear toward women were Ikuto's best traits but also believed they were Ikuto's flaws. Kuno stated that if those feelings made it hard for Ikuto to live freely, then Kuno believed that Kuno should be the one to endure and suppress those feelings. Ikuto thanked Kuno, which confused Kuno. Kuno asked why Ikuto was thanking Kuno. Ikuto explained that it simply meant Kuno was worried about Ikuto. Kuno then asked whether Ikuto would improve Ikuto's behavior. Ikuto admitted uncertainty about that. Kuno reacted with a frustrated sound. Ikuto stated that talking things out like this and finding a line they could both agree on was the best way to handle it, and that they would both feel better that way. Ikuto reflected internally that in this world, Kuno's overprotective stance was probably considered correct, but living exactly how people told Ikuto to live felt suffocating. Ikuto believed that it was not who Ikuto was and that blindly obeying was boring. Kuno then concluded that, in other words, Ikuto was fine with Kuno staying exactly as Kuno was. Ikuto agreed enthusiastically, saying to bring on the overprotectiveness, then sat beside Kuno and suggested that they go out together the next day, promising to buy Haagen-Dazs. Kuno made a huffing expression and declared that, in that case, the lecture was adjourned. Ikuto's mother then commented honestly that watching Ikuto really glitched her sense of male values and asked whether Ikuto thought Ikuto was a handful. Ikuto's mother immediately reassured Ikuto, saying that Ikuto was a wonderful son, almost too good for a mother like her. Ikuto laughed internally and reflected that mothers in this world usually spoilt their sons rotten and were generally super warriors, but Ikuto's mother was different. She did not coddle Ikuto and made Ikuto handle Ikuto's own business, which Ikuto liked better because it was closer to Ikuto's previous life. Ikuto's mother added that this praise applied to Kuno as well. Kuno thanked Ikuto's mother politely. Ikuto's mother then advised Ikuto that for some people, saying what they really wanted to say was difficult, because a single word could sometimes destroy a relationship, and that Ikuto needed to make an effort to notice how others were feeling once in a while. Ikuto responded cheerfully. Ikuto's mother remarked that this exact attitude was why Ikuto looked like an idiot. Ikuto replied confidently that since there were no idiots around Ikuto, everything would surely be fine. Kuno reacted with an angry expression. The scene then shifted to the classroom, where Ikuto was sleeping during class. Rui observed Ikuto and thought with a sigh that Ikuto was just as defenseless as ever. While other boys were constantly on guard, Ikuto was the only one who could sleep soundly in a classroom. Rui admitted that if it meant being able to see Ikuto's sleeping face, maybe this was not so bad, even though Rui had once had zero interest in boys. Rui reflected that it was because of men that Rui had grown to hate herself. Rui remembered male classmates from the past, mocking her size and calling her freaky, spreading rumors that she would attack instantly if anyone got close, and referring to Rui as that giant woman, Toosaka. Rui reflected that they had judged her selfishly, based solely on her appearance, which was why Rui had quickly developed a complex regarding boys. Even the girls had stayed away from Rui. Desperate to avoid being hated by the rare few boys, Rui began hiding her breasts, struggling to breathe, and realized she could not go on living like that. When Rui entered middle school, Rui decided to reinvent herself as an Eichmann girl, a type apparently popular with other girls. Rui changed her tone of voice, demeanor, realized, and everything else she possibly could. Thanks to that, Rui managed to live a slightly more bearable school life, but deep down in her heart, Rui came to hate herself even more. Rui believed that unless she was wearing a mask, people would not even acknowledge her, that the real Rui was hated, and that she was only worth anything when living a lie. Rui questioned what the point of her existence even was. Later, someone suggested a particular high school and told Rui that if it were her, Toosaka-san, she could aim for a male guardian slot. Rui repeated the words, male guardian internally, and thought about guarding the very boys who rejected her existence. Rui believed they would surely be terrified of her and demand that she be fired anyway. However, when Rui looked into the details, she saw that it included a full scholarship and living expenses, and the benefits were incredible. Rui decided that if she was going to keep living a lie anyway, she would not do it to protect boys but would become a guardian for her own sake. Later, a teacher explained that this would be Rui's assigned guardian position. Rui formally introduced herself as Toosaka Rui and stated that she would do her very best while bowing. The teacher's phone rang, and the teacher walked out while answering the call, expressing annoyance at the interruption. In the present, Ikuto stared at Rui. Rui asked whether there was something on her face. Ikuto apologized and explained that Ikuto had been thinking about how insanely handsome Rui was, amazed that such a genuinely handsome guy actually existed in this world. Ikuto remarked that it was no wonder someone like Ikuto was not popular and assumed that Rui must be extremely popular, with many friends and fans. Rui made a sad expression and admitted that she was far from being popular and did not really have many friends either. Ikuto was stunned. Rui hesitated awkwardly, and Ikuto suddenly apologized loudly, admitting that it was completely Ikuto's fault for not knowing Rui's circumstances. Ikuto explained that he had only wanted them to get along and had rushed things too much, apologizing sincerely. Rui responded that Ikuto did not need to apologize that much. Ikuto then suggested that since they were the same age, Rui could call Ikuto by name. Rui hesitated, thinking about calling a boy by his name without honorifics. Ikuto asked whether that was a no. Rui's heart raced, and Rui said that she understood. Ikudo then thanked Rui and asked whether they could drop the formal speech. Rui agreed hesitantly and addressed Ikudo by name. Ikudo happily greeted Rui and said it was nice to meet Rui. Rui reflected that this was the first time Rui had ever seen a boy smile at her. Rui then asked whether Ikudo was afraid of her. Ikudo responded with confusion. Rui pointed out that she was tall and had a large build, thinking internally that deep down Ikudo must see her as just a giant woman, like all the other boys. Ikudo responded that there was nothing wrong with that and stated that appearance was not the only thing that defined a person. Ikudo said that what mattered most was personality and chemistry, and that although they had not talked much yet, Ikudo genuinely wanted to get along with Rui. Rui was stunned and wondered why Ikudo would say such things, realizing that no boy had ever spoken to her that way before. Rui wondered whether it was possible that not every single boy was exactly the same. Rui became teary, and Ikudo extended his hand, saying that from then on, Ikudo would be relying on Rui as a partner. Rui extended her hand as well and, while shaking hands, agreed that she would be counting on Ikudo too. In the present, Rui reflected that since then, Ikudo had really kept her on her toes. As soon as school started, Ikudo went around chatting everyone up, desperate to be popular, often making girls misunderstand Ikudo's intentions. Rui believed that if she had not been there as Ikudo's guardian, those carnivorous girls would have eaten Ikudo alive by now. Rui observed Ikudo helping a girl carrying heavy books, taking them from her and offering assistance, causing the girl to blush. Rui then saw Ikudo checking on another girl who said she felt sick, offering to carry her to the infirmary, which made the girl's embarrassment worsen. Rui thought about Ikudo himself, and Ikudo remarked that he was just doing what anyone would do. Rui reflected that simply because Rui happened to be a handsome guy standing next to Ikudo, Ikudo had convinced himself that he was the unpopular one. Rui realized that Ikudo had no idea that he was making even the carnivorous girls flustered and shy because they were not used to this kind of treatment. Rui concluded that Ikudo was far too oblivious and that life was certainly never boring with Ikudo around. As Ikudo continued sleeping at his desk, Rui thought quietly that Rui was actually a girl, the exact kind of girl Ikudo was always looking for. Rui acknowledged that she was not like the other girls and did not just want any man. Rui admitted that if it was for Ikudo, Rui would do anything, blushing as she thought so.
By the way, if you enjoyed the video, maybe consider liking and subscribing, pretty please?